Okay, I want to welcome my listeners, my my followers back to what I'm calling this summertime series of conversations or my pop-up podcast where I'm talking to people who I believe are sort of like living embodiments of the 10 permissions in many ways. People who are really intentionally designing lives that serve them, that suit this moment, and I feel like summertime's a great time for you to kind of allow your imagination to wander to what's possible in your life, what's desirable, the parts of your life that maybe feel like you might have more room than you think to play around with them and decide what you want them to look like. And I'm super excited about who's joining me today, Nicolette and Jeremy. I'm going to jump right in and not do a big long introduction. We met many years ago here in South Africa. So I'm not from South Africa, but I live here. You are from South Africa. And when we met, you were living here in Cape Town. Then we reunited, Nicolette, when you guys had moved, long after you guys had moved to Australia. And now you are on the verge of another new chapter as you prepare to move to Italy. Can you guys tell us a little bit about this journey of yours, this beautiful kind of meandering geographic path that you've carved for yourself? What just give us the highlights and a little bit of insight into what's driven you as you've kind of set out to create this life for yourselves.
Mm.
You start.
So we met each other in Kenya,
Okay.
and both of us had spent a little bit of time in Europe already, and then we needed a common denominator, so off we went to South Africa, because that's somewhere we both had a passport, and um, and then I think two things really drove us. I think it's a good squirt of curiosity, you know, because already in South Africa we were thinking, hey, we should head over to Europe, and then we also, I'd say, a little bit of necessity, and I think both of those are really really good drivers. So off we went to the Netherlands, where we then stayed for a couple of years to also get our citizenship, and then I think it was the curiosity again that drove us over here to Australia, and we've had such a
Hmm.
fantastic time, and there's a little bit of necessity and curiosity, I think, pushing us all the way over to Italy again. I'd say it's a blend of those two things that I always say necessity is the best driver, and curiosity is such a good catalyst and just smooths over everything. So I'd say those two
Hmm.
things mainly have really been driving us to jump around a lot. We love it.
Yeah, I think yeah, you call it necessity, I call it security. I think
Mm.
it's always
Hmm.
striving for that extra bit of security. First it was a citizenship, then it's a job, um, then it's career related, etc. But I think then that adventure piece is huge. And I think for just for the decision to come to Australia, I think was largely around the sun and lifestyle and yeah, just
Mm.
going for that, I don't know, optimizing life, I guess.
She puts it nicely. She put her foot down
Ah.
and said, "We're moving to the sun." End of conversation.
Well, the sun, other than your little stint in the Netherlands, the sun does feel like it's a common denominator in all these destinations.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, optimizing lifestyle is, wow, why are we not all doing that? Like, you say it, and I'm like, yeah. And then there's a part of me that's like, but why would we humans not all want to optimize? Like, and I
Mm.
know that's a very like corporate word, but
Mm.
Hmm.
I think what you're describing, that's beautiful kind of combination of necessity slash security plus curiosity is like so ideal for a lot of us.
Mm.
And yet what you're doing for a lot of people might feel like, oh, that looks from the outside very insecure. You don't have a base,
Yeah.
you don't have a job that I guess, has this kind of feel of long-term security. How
Mm.
have you made what
Mm.
feels like a pipe dream for a lot of people realistic for you?
Hmm. Yeah, maybe I'll reflect a bit first. I think it's It's interesting you say that it might seem insecure to a lot of people. And we actually often get this question, or people rather reflect on it and say, oh, you guys are so brave, making
Mm-hmm.
another big move. But I think we found security initially, coming from South African background, not a lot of money and so on. Like security had a certain meaning, it was about money, it was about physical safety and all those sort of things. And I think as time goes on, um, just reflecting on it more and more, security takes on a different meaning. And I think for me
Mm-hmm.
now, that sits in, well, I think first and foremost, the confidence that I actually have the ability and the capability to kind of self-direct my life, to make a decision, to execute on it and be successful, whatever that means. I think it also sits in our relationship. I think both of us know that we're going to have each other's back no matter what kind of crazy idea we come up with. Also in friendships, in networks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just really that deep trust in yourself. And I think you speak about this in your work a lot as well, that those kind of more traditional things like the corporate career and all that, that used to feel super safe. And I think we both have realized over time that, yeah, we actually have a lot of security just in ourselves, and we trust ourselves that we'll be okay no matter where we go. And hence we have that confidence that we can choose an adventure and go for that next thing. Yeah, let's move for the sun, because we know we'll figure out everything else. Just put it down and we'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we got to recognize a couple of huge enablers, and Nikki's mentioned them. I think the first one is just taking the first step. Because this will be country number 6, I think, 5.
5.
Country number 5 we moved to since we've known each other, and we've been together for just over a decade. But a couple of big enablers. Definitely, it starts off with a confidence, but just taking that first step, because once you do it the first time, regardless of your driver, the subsequent ones, I was telling her a little while ago, now we're headed over to Italy, a different continent again, and I don't really even have those butterflies in my stomach, nervous and afraid that I used to have in the beginning. So, having done it a couple of times, then having a partner that you can count on, I think makes a big difference. But not only in terms of their thriftiness and ability to adapt, but just that they're adding to the spice. I think that's a huge enabler. We've we
Mm-hmm.
we've not prioritized having kids so far. That's obviously a very big enabler. Yeah, I think there are a couple of those types of enablers that just make it a little bit easier. But if I needed to call out one thing, I'd probably say the one characteristic about us is that we always make a decision. We, even if it's a boring decision, but we really challenge ourselves to not leave things to fate. Nikki's got a big internal locus of control. I've got a surprisingly large external locus of control, but nevertheless, we sort of push ourselves to always make a decision, stop, think, evaluate, choose what you want. I loved how you said it earlier, like design something. Yeah, design what you want, and then make sure you drive yourself to make the decision, and then whichever direction the decision is. But as long as you take ownership, and I always say it's not a luxury. It's a duty to to decide.
Yeah.
Have you read
Maybe I
my
can.
book, Jeremy? You're like
More's the
you're
pity
like
I do not.
literally speaking from my book, but you know that I'm yeah. I mean, this is so my favorite word agency, which is, intentional choice and action, intentional decision making, which sounds on paper like, yeah, of course. I mean, that's what we do as humans, and yet everybody knows we don't. We either don't act, we get caught in indecision, or we outsource our choices to everything around us. So
Yeah.
you guys are walking
Hmm.
embodiments of agency and action. So sorry I
Yeah.
interrupted you,
Mm.
Nikki. You were
No,
gonna
no,
you
not
were
at
gonna
all.
say something.
Yeah, I actually just want to do. It's interesting you mentioned the decision. I didn't think about that, but he's got this really interesting process that he's been, I want to say, kind of like enforcing the last 10 years, that it can be highly uncomfortable. But he's got this really interesting decision making process, and he can elaborate a little bit. But I would say, in essence, it means actually, if there is a decision to be made, make the decision, start executing on the decision, because only then you really know how you feel about the decision. And once you've made it and you've started executing on it, you can always change your mind again, but it's kind of that final confirmation, and it's really hard to do that confirmation if you don't act on it. And so I think that's what happens a lot. People say, oh, I'm fed up with this job, and speak to them in a year, 2 years, 3 years, and they're still fed up with the same job. Or, hey, we'd like to go abroad, maybe we've got ancestry in Europe or whatever the case might be. We want to go for the passport, we want to move. And 5 years later, that's still the case, because it is so hard and there's no right answer. And all of these things are so complex. And I think then, within all this complexity, you can kind of stay paralyzed for so long. But the thing that, we then do, and I really learned this skill from him, is actually make the decision. So with Italy, what that meant is we actually started selling up things here in Australia. We started looking at, where might we want to stay. We started communicating to people, and sometimes our friends, think, we're bad because we will communicate a decision and then move really far along with executing on it. And then at number 99 say, actually, you know what? This was not a great decision. We're going to reverse that decision. And so I think that's how we can go from thinking something interesting or big, start executing on it, make the decision, and only then you'll know whether that was actually the right decision for you at the time.
I think the only thing that I wanted to add was, it's easy for somebody like me to say, yeah, just, make sure you take ownership and you make the decision. I mean, that pretty much sounds like a little self-help thing that doesn't really help anything. But as Nikki says, for me, the secret is not you make the decision. It's find a way to make decisions accessible to you. And for us, that little simulation which really is, well, I always say you've got all the information you need pretty much to make the call. But how we make it accessible is we make a in principle decision. Then we allow ourselves, without communicating it externally, only internally, it's an in principle decision already. So your mind goes into true simulation mode as opposed to theoretical. And then we run through, and it makes it very real because it's already an in principle decision. But what really empowers the process is, after a period of time that we give ourselves, we either overturn the decision or confirm the decision. And that, just giving yourself that space to simulate it much more realistically than just theoretically dreaming about it, but also the freedom to, after your true analysis, your simulation, the freedom to overturn it or to confirm it. That's really helped a lot. And then sometimes we've needed to overturn them. When simulation mode, you learn this is not really it. But and then once you confirm it, the last step is always execute like a, not to swear here, but execute like a beast. And and that little process has helped us a lot.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I love that you've just outlined that, because I think that'll be very helpful for a lot of people who, as you say, Jeremy, might say, "Oh, cool, take a decision, but what does that look like?" And I love the idea that you start to, with some sort of low key actions and choices, nudge yourself along. So start to do some things that don't have to be, quitting your job and selling your house straight away, but that start to move you in that direction to see what that feels like. I want to, so as you're talking, I'm thinking, it's so logical. It makes so much sense. Like, this is you guys are not flying around like a couple of nomads on a joyride. This is a very thoughtful process of taking your life in directions that you want to take it to. And again, it's kind of what stops so many of us from doing that. And I want to talk about this idea of experiments, because in some ways, you're approaching this like a hypothesis, an experiment that you're undertaking in your life, and allowing yourself to see how that plays out, giving yourself permission to do it, to also say, actually, this is not what we thought it was going to be. Let's go back. And I don't think a lot of us as adults feel allowed to do any of those things. We are very deeply imprinted with the moving straight forward in a linear path, one very secure in the sense that there is a predictable outcome. And that predictable outcome usually involves some sort of increased financial remuneration or increased status or something that looks secure. There's this idea of how you move forward, and it locks us into place very much in status quo mode because we don't even allow ourselves to do this very thoughtful exercise that you do.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
people, you've just alluded to it. You can talk to people for years in a row who remain in exactly the same circumstances. So part of the premise of the 10 permissions is that we're moving into a just ever more disruptive world, accelerated. We won't even have the luxury, if you will,
mm,
of not taking on
mm,
this more experimental, this more adaptive approach. So
mm,
you've talked about how it kind of gets more comfortable with time, you gain more confidence in time. What what this experiment, this way of experimenting with
mm,
life, what's in terms of your own lived experience of it, like being inside of these moves,
mm,
what would you say are some of the sort of other
mm,
core emotional capabilities that you would say, be prepared to ABC, be prepared to feel
mm.
this, be prepared to so that when it happens, people don't go, "Oh, this is a disaster. I have to return to, the safety of my familiar straight path." Like, what would you say
Mm.
from the inside out to people who might be looking at you going, amazing. Now, what can I expect to feel as I move through this that I shouldn't be afraid of if I feel it?
So, a little bit of a multi-channel answer. The first is I just want to recognize that mainstream channel thinking.
Hmm.
I when I went to university, I said because I started studying only late. I was never planning on study, never had the money for it. And then when I got there, I said you arrive at university as a question mark and you leave there as a period, because there already you start getting channeled into a very mainstream kind of way of thinking, which I don't dispute. I don't even dislike. It is just something that happens. And if you then don't follow the mainstream, which we obviously haven't, there's always this voice in your mind questioning how silly are you really? Doing this next crazy thing or this next crazy, because it's often removed from the mainstream. So that always remains a voice at the back of your mind. So I just want to recognize that, and we still obviously experience that.
Mm.
Um,
Mm,
that said, um, I think I think, and then just to talk a little bit about our reasoning about that. Um,
mm,
I would encourage that that you must believe in your reason.
Mm.
You got to believe in your reason. Yeah, of course, I've met countless people, who have made moves, gone abroad, done something out of the ordinary, but it was backed up by a little bit of fickleness, just doing something for the sake of it without a solid reason, and those
mm,
get blown over relatively easy. It's as you say, we're not like digital nomads and traveling around. This is a pretty set
mm,
thought out rational type of approach, and so you have
mm,
strength there. It's patient, but it's in a constant direction. So I think you've got to believe in the reason, and that gives a lot of power. Something that helped me immensely with overcoming that fear of sticking to the straight and narrow, if you like it. And it's maybe a weird way to think about it, but it's my experience. I had the opportunity to spend some time with some massive corporate personalities across the world, and you're always, most of the time, you're chasing in the direction of that career promotion, which comes along with
mhm,
that money and getting
mhm,
to the top, whatever the top is, right? And having spent so much time with all these folks, and I mean, it's really some of the top captains of industry globally, you realize that it's a little bit of a lie. You get there, and I asked them straight up. I interviewed 10 of them and said, "Hey, is it worth it?" And I was really taken aback by how many how many of them told me, um, they've reached the top now, and how many of them told me it's not worth it. And then the little the little straight and narrow channel, the holy grail that you thought existed, you realize it doesn't. It's a farce.
Right.
One fellow told me, yo, I've got the Porsche and the Lamborghini. I never drive them. I'm on my third divorce, and I'm always in the hotels and in boardrooms and so on. And that specific individual told me, get out, get out, get out. And so when you then realize there is no rule book, truly, there is no rule book. It's really up to you and your priorities. And if that's your priority, and again, that's your reason, then absolutely 100% stick to it. But there is no rule book, and that inspires us to go, assuming there's no rule book, which we found there isn't, what do we want to do? And what are we going to make priority in the time that we have?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'll just absolutely reiterate that you need to have that. It's almost a belief system. And I think we, explore that and what do we believe to be true about life. I make a joke that we come here for the sun. It's more about, the lifestyle and actively engaging with life and with others, in community, and the sun just kind of enables that. But it's like knowing what are these kind of things you believe to be true about life, or what do you desire for yourself, or for a couple, if that's the case. But I think truly sticking to that, because it might look from the outside, if people live a life like ours where you move a lot and do all these things, that it just comes easy or naturally. To an extent it does, but there is a lot of fear, even just, if I can share, like, over the last week or two, we take different waves of like feeling so confident this is absolutely the right thing to do. And I mean, we can elaborate about why we're moving to Italy at a different time, but it is, we go through feeling super confident is exactly the right thing to do because there's these solid principles, this solid belief system. And the next day you wake up fearful, panicked, stressed, because you're like, what are we doing? Like, should we just actually go find a job in Sydney and, do what, many other people do, or what we've actually, studied for, and so on. So you're definitely going to go through that wave. So if you're asking what to expect, I think it's not always going to feel like, I think you think and that's why we spend so much time trying to make the right decision, because we think if we're going to make the right decision, that we're going to feel super confident, super comfortable, and everything will just fall in place magically. That doesn't happen. Even if you're making the best decision for yourself, it can still feel really, really scary. And don't let that fool you. Go back to your principles, go back to your belief system, know what that is. And yeah.
But I mean, fear comes up so often, obviously, in these conversations. And I really want to, I think it's so important for all of us to just look with great curiosity and interest in our own relationship with fear, because we've all been so kind of prepared and imprinted with this idea that fear is a sign that you're doing something wrong. And it's precisely the opposite to me. It's a sign that you're going in a direction that is calling you. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work out. It doesn't mean it's the right decision, but it certainly is not a reason to turn back. And the feeling that I think we have a much greater capability than we know to handle fear too, to hold it in us. It is not going to eat us alive and destroy us. And we're now living through what I think is the cumulative effect of years of sort of people who've become, so sort of put to sleep by the idea that ease, the lack of any form of fear, the lack of any acute feeling about life is the desired life. Like that for me is also
Well
where I'm
said.
just like, how were we sold the idea that to not feel any form of extreme emotion is our desired state?
Yeah.
And here we are, with an epidemic of people who I think are the absence of feeling, the absence of vitality is so much sort of part of our current global dilemma.
So well said, Jill. Of course, as humans, we're always driving for comfort, um, and I mean, honestly speaking, that's probably perfect for the majority of folk. I call them the happy people. And sometimes I wish I was the happy people. But what I've learned is, and fear is real. Like Nikki was explaining, I mean, we go, "Oh, what are we doing?" But what I've learned is, whatever you fear it's generally the unknown, right? And
Yes,
what
of
I've
course. Yeah.
learned is, you whatever you think you got to be afraid of and what you're actually afraid of, when you get there, you realize it doesn't even exist. What you should
Right.
have been afraid of something else, but you didn't know about it.
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
so it's, to a large extent, it's an unknown. It's an unknown.
Mm.
And what I have also found is, most of the time, and this is maybe where that confidence thing comes again. Once you get there, you realize you were afraid of the the boogeyman under the bed. It's not
Yep.
there. And then once you get there, you're faced with a new set of circumstances that you can fear or not fear, and some of them you do. But guess what? As every single other thing in your life up to that point, when you get to that new piece of known that is now no
Mm.
longer unknown, you figure it out.
Yep.
It's really that simple. Just take the
Yeah.
step, because you're dreaming up something that you shouldn't
Mm.
really be afraid of. And even if
Mm.
you get there and you realize, oh, okay, there is some reality in this reservation I have. Yeah, like everything else you've handled your whole life, which is an amazing amount,
Yeah.
you'll handle
Hmm.
that one as well.
Absolutely. And I think for me, this is where I often go back to my own experience in development and working with people who genuinely had things to fear, whose lives were at risk, from taking a decision that ran counter to tradition or convention. In the book and in my work, I talk about working with women who genuinely had a lot to fear,
Mm-hmm.
whose safety was at risk, whose lives were at risk. I mean, those are real fears. And it's
Those are
not
real
to,
fears.
that's a real fear. And it's not to dismiss the fear that the rest of us feel, but as you're describing, it's to kind of learn to work with it and look at it and accept the fact that it is attempting to protect you, but it is so much worse in your imagination than it is in real life. Your imagination is far scarier for most of us than what we're actually going to face. And if it's fear of rejection,
Absolutely.
fear of your parents' disapproval, fear of your friends kind of going, which is kind of where I want to go with you guys now, because for a lot of people, other people's opinions is huge. I mean, you talked about an external locus of control, which I think describes most of us. And most people are very afraid of what their parents will think, what their friends will think, what their spouse will think. And that set of opinions and judgments is a silent, limiter. So, how have you guys dealt with other people's opinions about your choices?
Mm.
Wow, I'm trying to think what's the best kind of angle to come at this come at this at, because I think that is still, and definitely in the age of social media, it's just it's huge, and I was even saying yesterday, I'm considering with this trip to Europe now to actually just even delete all of it, because in small ways and big ways, we
Mm.
had this with LinkedIn, for example, because part of what we're doing now is outside of the more traditional corporate system, at least for the time being. And I think what it comes down to is that over time, I think what can really easily happen is that you shape your identity around what other people think about you, who you are. And that was something that I struggled with, when I was younger. You're in a job, you become an expert in something, just because you do it long enough, people see you as that. Your family start understanding that's what you do, or so clinging to an idea of who you were when you were younger, a teenager, a student, etc. Um, and I think we so often then play the character that other people imagine us at, or imagine us to be, or know us to be even. But I think
Mhm.
just realizing, and this is something we reflect on often with moving different countries, is every time you put yourself in a different environment, you learn something new about yourself, but you
Mm.
also leave something of, let's say, your old self behind. And so you
Yeah.
actually change a lot, you grow a lot, you do become a different person. And I think, we can limit ourselves so much by sticking to an old version of who people see us at. And I think that's, even now that is still really hard, because we say to people, we're in Australia, we settled, and we had good jobs here, and, luckily I can continue that. But you you feel almost sometimes like it makes no sense to others, and so you feel
Hmm.
maybe hesitant to communicate about it. But I do think what we also do really well is to find those people that actually think like us, and that we can have these conversations to with, and get excited with us.
Yeah.
um yeah, but then again, I think it comes back to that belief in
Mm.
why you're doing it and the principles, and I think often that is very different to the mainstream principles.
Mm.
Mm.
I think
Yeah.
I'd only add two things. The one is, and in a sense, everything comes back to that. Challenge yourself, and we do challenge each other to put priority where priority is due. And that's, of course, different for every individual,
Mm.
right? For us, other people's perspectives um, isn't a determining priority. And it's funny again, but once you've realized that those are just let's say vapor shackles you
Mm.
put on yourself. Once you've realized that, you might go, oh my goodness, it really meant nothing. So
Mm.
I think that's the one thing I'll say about it. And the other one is inspire them. Um, it's so nuts about, so many of the folk
Mm.
who, even mentors of mine, who are so straight, narrow, wise, always do the right thing. And again, these people arrived at the top. I thought I would be disappointing them so hard by a lot of the stuff we do. And then, when you speak to them, you realize you inspire them.
Mm.
And so I sort of want to say, yeah, inspire people as opposed to
Mhm.
considering and again making up these trying to put yourself in their mind and thinking what they would think of you. Follow that priority of yours, whatever it is, and then the chances are you will not disappoint but inspire.
Yeah.
That's
Mm.
pretty powerful. I mean, it's a
That's
cool energy, inspiration.
Yeah, and I think
yeah.
being authentic in itself, that's always inspiring. And actually, you made me think of just the last reflection I had on the fear topic, where I don't know the science behind it, but how fear and anxiety can feel very similar to excitement.
Mm.
And that's
Yeah.
something that I try to really reflect on, and I heard you, Jill, saying, what if you disappoint your parents? What if you disappoint your spouse? Or, what if they think you're making wrong decisions? Yeah. Hell, what if they're really excited for you? What if they think that you're living the hell out of life?
Yeah.
And yeah, like, I mean,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, if someone doesn't wish that for you, then I think that's a different conversation. If you're choosing the thing that's right for you, you're being fully authentic, you're living life, and someone doesn't wish that for you, yeah, I
Mm,
think that says more
mm,
about them than about you.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
And
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 I
I
think this. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, no,
I
I was
just want
gonna
to
say.
carry on,
Okay, go on.
carry on, Jill.
No, I was
We have
gonna
too
say.
much to talk about and too little time.
I know. I'm like, oh no. I wanted to say, as part of your exercise, because you approach this so methodically, I was thinking of, what's required and what's desired. So, in the book, I talk a little bit about the fact that people's approval is, desirable but not required in most cases. So when you start to accept that it would be really nice if, my friends and family cheered me on, but it's not a requirement for me to act, then you can sort of begin to get comfortable. And in my experience, as you're sort of describing, the people who love you, even if there's a period of adjustment for them to kind of work out this emerging version of you and wrap their heads around what's going on, eventually you will find your way back towards a place where you can, but I think when you realize that that is not a green light, red light situation, that green light is here, you're the one who signals it. And yes, it feels great to have a lot of people cheering on the sidelines for you, but it isn't a requirement. And sometimes the freedom to move with a little bit of quiet around you, with people kind of going, I don't know what, Nicolette and Jeremy are doing, but, there they go, is, as you say, okay, fine, then I'm going to go. I'm going to take up this space that I've created for myself. And maybe I won't have 1,000 eyes on me going, but, I'll
Yeah.
have room, I'll have space
Mm.
in which to figure this out. Because I think we're also talking a lot about being in what I call figure it out mode. And you come deep into self in that. There's Yes, there are people who can help you, but you start, that's where you gain what you're describing is that confidence and that clarity that I am my best security. And
Mm.
so let me do this. Let me work on this. So, when you realize that that praise and approval and is wonderful but not required for you to act, it's when you start to let go of some of those mental shackles that you're talking about, Jeremy.
Massively. I'll be a little bit dramatic, just to make the point, but outside your mom or your lover, whatever shape that takes, nobody's thinking about you. And so, no, it's nuts. But because we're
True.
so in our own heads, we think everybody's checking and thinking about us all the time. And especially in our generation, who grew up with social
Mm,
media,
mm,
somehow you feel like all the eyes on you. You're not.
mm.
You're not. You're a
No.
lot less important. Like your mom and your partner, they think about you often. For the rest, they don't.
Mm.
And again,
Yeah.
I think it's these vapor shackles that we put on each other. I can't agree with you more, Joe.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think maybe just the last thing I would add there is, empathy for everyone's perspective.
Hmm.
People react to what you want to do, or what you say you want to do from different perspectives. You mentioned the kids example. The number of people that's really tried to say, oh, you guys should really think about it, or what you're doing. Like, that's kind of one of the right things to do in life. And we don't know, we might still get there, but like, it's just, from their perspective, that is the right thing to do, and that's important, and
Hmm.
that's a priority for them. And so I think at the same time, having empathy for that, but knowing that that's not deterministic in your life,
Mm,
like you rightly said.
fully.
Sure. I want to finish off because with travel light, which is one of my permissions, and you guys are like spokespeople. I want to get t-shirts printed for you, but you are travel light in a lifestyle. And interestingly, it's one that people are kind of like, okay, because it has practical, super practical implications on how you envision your life. And the fact that so much of our success story around adulthood involves stuff and assets. Um, I think it's something that's super hard for people to wrap their heads around. That, my life might not be rooted in a set of assets that shapes like where I live and how I move around. Talk to me a little bit about how you're moving around, what you're moving around with, what it feels like for you, or how you interpret that travel light in your own life. Like, does your life fit in two suitcases? Like, where are you right now in terms of
Yeah.
your possessions?
So maybe I'll start, because I was just laughing when you said travel light, because we're sitting here and upstairs we've got, 4 suitcases, 2 small carry-ons, and two big suitcases. And I mean, travel light, we gather a box here and there as we go, but I think that's always been a principle of ours. And to really travel light and not to put our things in things. And I think it's a really interesting reflection, because in the past, when we've made decisions that were less light, I think we've realized, like, ooh, that actually doesn't feel that good.
Mm,
Things, for example, we believe in trying to do everything without debt. We've had, I think, student debt, which is paid off, and we had a mortgage at one point, and I think we've realized that's something we never want again. So
mm,
I think it comes in that, debt is one thing that really ties us down. The other one is, yeah, just big things around the house. We furnished the house in the Netherlands with new furniture. We thought we would have it for 10 years. And I think, reflecting after that, the next time we moved here, we were like, ooh, we actually don't want to make a decision to stay in a country, yes or no, because we spent thousands of dollars on a dining room table.
right,
And I think,
right.
then going with that, what's the kind of the cheapest we can get it for, that still, looks great and serves our purpose, but not being tied down by these artificial things. And then I think, yeah, maybe I'll actually pause there and hear your
Yeah,
reflection.
no, it's not dissimilar. I think there are phases in your life, right, which all attract their own priorities. I mean, I've gone through that. So I mean, we've owned property, like Nikki says, we furnished it with all the coolest stuff, and then 3 years later liquidated it all again. Um, so I think there are phases in your life. For us, because we prioritized we prioritized mobility and freedom. Um, Again, for us, that was important. So we make decisions that loosely are able to, you can tie them back somehow.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest jailer, I believe, on earth is debt. Once you got that 30-year mortgage and the bank's got you, and hence your employer's got you,
Mm-hmm.
and those two really tie you down. And I don't ridicule, but it's just recognize that those two things can bind you hard. And I mean, we've had professional careers, so it's not like we avoid it and only work in beach bars or something. Um, but yeah,
Nothing wrong with
but
working in
again,
a beach bar.
recognize, no, absolutely. But recognize things that can hold you down and whether they need to. And, depending again on your priorities, um, make your decisions accordingly. We do think very long term. It's, we go into the unknown, but the let's say the red thread of your life, because we are material beings in the end, and we need money and so on. Take a long term view there and try and do the best you can with the limited knowledge we all have. And of course, it costs you, right? We haven't spoken about the drawbacks of living light and moving around. There are quite a few. So, and it does cost you. It costs you network, costs you money every time you move around, etc. But nevertheless, look, for us, it's worth it. But yeah, take a long-term view on the important stuff according to your priority, and look out for those very long-term shackles, whether they're true or perceived.
And can I
Right.
just add actually something that I think is really important to mention? We did say it a few times, but it's really important to you can make any decision you want to, as long as you are deliberate about it. Living with
Mm.
a few suitcases and a few boxes and moving countries every few years, like, to us seems like a great adventure and living life to the full. To someone else, that might be, buying a house, having 5 kids, and, living close to family. And that is beautiful and really important too. I think it's just
Right.
really important to be deliberate about that decision so that you don't feel held prisoner by decisions that your past self made, or you don't start feeling resentful towards decisions that you made. I think if you're deliberate about it and you know why you're making a decision, then any decision can be a good decision.
And that thank you for that, because it's really important for me as I wrote the book to say this was not advocating a certain lifestyle. This was not suggesting that we needed to be, to use the common word, nomadic. That isn't the point of Travel Light. It is, as you're saying, to get super intentional about understanding the ways in which your choices shape your path. And the fact that in a very fluid world, the reality that, our path gets narrower and more stuck in place the more that we have. And so what worked in the past might not work as well for us now. And I think we've got legions of people now who are staring at potential job shifts and career shifts as a result of AI, going, how am I going to pay that mortgage? What am I going to do? Or just having this voice in the back of their heads going, how can I possibly maintain this, where I am? Because the story is you always have to have more, right? You always have to be accumulating more to be successful.
Yep.
And the point here is to say, okay, we're going to go through phases where we might expand, contract, shift, change priorities. That's okay. We're not failures because of that. We're not losers
Yep.
because we decide to sell something in order to enable greater flexibility for a moment where we need it. Like, that isn't a sign that you've fallen off. That's a sign that you're moving into a more exploratory phase of your life. And I think we often we carry the script, and it limits us or it weighs us down with, self-recrimination, questioning, that doesn't allow us to take advantage of, to either be responsive and adaptive in the way that we have to be, or in your case, in the way that you want to be. And that's why I think you guys are such a wonderful story of, professionals, if you will, who are, designing a very deliberate life path, which may or may not be everybody's choice, but it doesn't really matter. It's just an example of what's possible
Mm,
when you get super intentional and when you're
mm,
really clear about what matters to you and what your
mm,
desires are. So I think you're very inspiring, and I think you're very instructive for the next decade when more and more people are going to be making choices that might feel really uncomfortable and scary. And, to know that it's okay. You start to build up your own capability to do the
Mm.
unconventional, the unexpected, and to realize that you've got more capability than maybe you thought you
mm.
had. So I'm just
Jill,
grateful to have heard your
you shine a
story.
light. Thank you. You shine a light on something that is probably more important than anything in this conversation, and that is, um, not to get all philosophical about it, but there's a lot of patterns that emerged in the previous two generations, from the greatest generations, right? From the greatest generation on, and even in the Gen X's, and we assumed, and we were brought up to think that's the path. That's the way we got to go. Let's just take retirement, and the path to retirement is one. And increasingly, it's appearing that those were one generation, maybe two generation wonders, and is not the reality for the generations thereafter. But we
No,
live it as if that's the one truth, the only
Mm.
truth.
that's right.
Increasingly, I'm 42, and all the people that I meet, not all the people, but the vast majority of the folks in the Gen Ys and later, let's say born after 1982, that the pattern that the folks before us followed and the pattern they will follow are two markedly
Mm.
Yep.
different things. And I think this should be encouragement, for us all, um, to 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 write the script and flip the script and not feel compelled, to stay in those, in the models of the past, which definitely are not the models of, I don't know what the answers are. I'm searching for them myself.
Yeah.
um, and all these smart words. There's only just one more fun thing I wanted to say. I needed to say it somewhere, and it relates to your word vitality.
Mm,
It is good to feel alive, and the magic happens on the edges.
yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh. And I think those two previous generations, I'm one of them. I take responsibility for some of this. Who in many ways were told to trade satisfaction for security. I mean, that was the implicit trade-off, right? If, being happy, being vital, the edges were off limits and your choices were shaped by your desire for financial security and status. And if you manage to be happy, great. But, I think all of us know way too many people, you've named some of them, who fit the mold, who are most certainly not. And so I actually feel very excited about the potential for future generations to not have to make that trade off. And I think you guys are a great example of that in action. So thank you for sharing your not only your story with us, but your really heartfelt sort of insights about what you've learned along the way. And I feel like I want to check in with you at some point from Italy and hear what it's like on the other side and how what
Oh.
you're discovering as you go. I'm just so excited for you, and I'm grateful that you took the time on your as you prepare to leave to chat to me. So thanks, guys.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks so much, Jill. And I think likewise, it's also very important to mention, thanks so much for the work that you do and for reaching out. And we read your newsletter religiously, and it's so often that we will say, hey, have you seen Jill's email? This is what she said, and we'll chat about it. And so whenever that comes through, we look forward to it. And so yeah, as we've been saying, that there are no rules. There are no rules. It is a bit scary, and I think we all have to try and figure it out together. And your work is so important in that. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks for those
Awesome.
mails, Jill. I love them. It's the only mails I get excited about.
You were just saying it to people earlier. Newsletters come in, you delete them immediately when Jill's ones come out. We read it,
I
think
actually
about it,
save it
dissect,
for when
we
I
chat
send
about
it
it,
sometime.
and yeah, we love
Thank
it.
you.
So thank you.
Oh gosh, we didn't need to end on that note, but I'm very happy to. I'm glad my experiment in my effort to do what I want to do and to take my life in the path that I want to take it to is actually having some sort of benefit on others. And I want to end by saying, so here's a thought, that the more that each one of us does that, the more that we're able to step out into the world and make a valuable contribution to, bring the best offer that we have to the world, the best version of ourselves, the best thing that we can give, that, when we break out of those vapor shackles, as you describe them, Jeremy, we find an ability to share something that is probably the reason why we're here. So, I guess it's a clarion call for all of us to do this. So thanks, guys, and bon voyage.
Thank you.
And I know wonderful adventures lay ahead for you. So thanks for being with me.
So good chatting.
Jill.
Thank you, Jill.
Chat soon.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye.